Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's begin our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen the 7 most important articles. We will cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start the discussion, I have an important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for Unacademy's online classes, now you have a great opportunity as a 12-month subscription is available at just 19,999. And if you avail this offer within the given period, you'll also get a chance to get up to 12 months of free extension. So those interested, click on the link provided in the video description and enter the code IAS English. And if you want the PDF of this session, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. And after the session, the PDF would be shared over here. So with this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 6, the Hindu carries an interesting article related to the Indian economy. In fact, today we have several important articles related to Indian economy. So this particular article is focused on India's self-reliance when it comes to its economic growth. The article talks about how India can power its own economic rise by focusing on the domestic economy, by focusing on India's inherent wealth and the assets that are owned by Indians. For example, what if I told you that Indian households, every single family, your mothers, grandmothers, what is stored in your almirahs, right? The gold which is held with individual families in the country. What if this can power India's economic rise and make India self reliant and truly Atmanirbhar without having to depend on external funding through international markets and foreign investments? How about India becomes Atmanirbhar when it comes to powering our economic story? This is the interesting discussion in this article. It's written by Gaurav Vallabh, one of the part-time members on the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. The writer talks about the Atmanirbhar vision of Prime Minister Modi, how India is marching towards becoming self-reliant in many key sectors. But however, recent economic developments and global geopolitical developments, they have cast a shadow on India's independent growth and India's independent policies, especially American tariffs and the bullying tactics of President Trump has taken a direct hit at the Indian economy. How the 50% tariffs have limited India's export potential. If India's exports are affected to the US market, this could directly translate into a downturn in the Indian economy, as several industries would take the direct hit, resulting in large scale unemployment, which could have a cascading effect on the Indian economy. So, this exposes the vulnerability of India's economy. Because until now, India's growth story of the last 3 decades has been powered by external funds and the foreign markets on which we have been dependent. Now, what if we switch this story around and power the next phase of India's growth through the assets and the wealth which is owned by the people of Bharat? So, that is the argument the writer is making. Until now, India has done pretty well, especially since 1990s, right? Since the last 3 decades, India has performed phenomenally well, registering tremendous growth. But this growth is largely powered through external investments, where India has had a dependency on foreign markets and foreign flows which are coming into the Indian market. But now the writer says the time has come for Bharat to power its own growth story through the assets of Bharat without depending on external funds, without depending much on external markets. So, this I find to be a very interesting argument. And the writer says how the gold, which is held privately in India, how this could power the next phase of Bharat's rise. That is the interesting argument the writer is making here. Now, let's look at some data. Let's look at some facts and statistics so that we can justify this argument if at all there is a mains question related to it. Now, if you look at the foreign funds which have flown into India since 2000, since 2000, India has received India has received up to $1 trillion in foreign inflows. When India opened up its economy in the 1990s and embraced globalization, liberalization, and started attracting foreign investments. Since then, in the last 25 years, roughly $1 trillion worth of investments have flown into India, which has powered India's infrastructure creation, which has powered India's economy. But the point is, we need not depend on such foreign fundings. We need not depend on external markets because there is a history of India being resilient despite global turn of events. Now, take for example, in 1960s, India was heavily dependent on food aid, which was delivered by others, particularly by the United States. Post independence, we were struggling with food security. Our agriculture had been decimated by centuries of colonial exploitation. The country was hit by droughts, famines. We were not producing enough food to put one square meal on the plates of our people. But from there to becoming a self reliant, self sufficient nation and becoming one of the largest producer of most agricultural commodities, India has come a long way and we have done this largely on our own. The green revolution that India pioneered, how we transformed the production of essential food grains and how we translated this into benefits for our agrarian community, for our rural population, and how today India has become one of the largest producer of most agricultural commodities. This is a success story of India, which was completely driven by India's internal push for self-reliance. So this is a great experience where India has stood on its own, even at the most difficult circumstances. With little global help, India has largely built its economy on its own. We saw this during 1990s as well, when India was faced with the BOP crisis, the balance of payments crisis, when the economy was on the brink of collapse. Yes, India did take a bailout support from IMF, but apart from that, India's own reforms that were pioneered by then Finance Minister Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister PV Narasimha Rao, it led to a transformation of the Indian economy through the LPG reforms. India leveraged this opportunity and the far-sighted policies of the then leadership, both at the central level and the state level, is what led to the digital revolution of India, the IT revolution in particular. Leaders like S.M. Krishna, Chandrababu Naidu, many others at the state level played a pivotal role through right policies and right reforms that attracted global talent, global capital, and brought global expertise into India, triggering the digital and the IT revolution, which has largely powered India's economy for the last 20, 30 years. So India was facing a serious crisis in 1991, but we stood on our own largely. We trusted our own instincts, relied on our wealth and assets, introduced the right reforms, and India came out on top. So there is a long history of India doing this, of India being self-reliant, of being truly Atmanirbhar. You take the 2008-2009 recession, for example, the subprime crisis that was triggered in the US market. This led to a domino effect across the world, and eventually the recession hit the Indian economy as well. Then, thanks to the policies of the then UPA government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, India managed to overcome the crisis. India became the only bright spot at that point in 2009-2010 when the whole global economy was suffering. India managed to quickly come out of the crisis and registered very decent growth thanks to the support given by the state, the public expenditure which went up, the liberalized credit policies of the RBI, and the direct incentive support from the government played a big role in India evading the deadly impact of the global recession. Then we also have the COVID-19 pandemic. During the pandemic, wasn't India largely self reliant? Didn't India produce the vaccines that were required? Imagine if we were to depend on foreign supplied vaccines. Maybe India would have never achieved herd immunity. Maybe it would have further led to a devastating blow on India's population. But India's self reliance, India's expertise in pharmaceuticals, in biosciences, gave us that advantage to focus internally with limited external support coming in. And at a moment of deep crisis, India managed to stand out on its own and we overcame the crisis. You take Operation Sindoor as well in the defense sector. One reason for India dominating over Pakistan during Operation Sindoor is largely the indigenous defense platforms that have been built. From our air defense systems to drones that were employed, many of them were indigenous systems developed indigenously by India. Yes, there were many foreign platforms which played a key role, but the indigenization of defense industry is happening at a rapid pace. You look at the army, air force, the navy, the kind of assets they are procuring. A large part of it is today made in India. So, if India can do this, then why rely on foreign capital investments and foreign markets entirely? Of course, you can't cut away from the global markets and global flow of funds, but at least we can insulate ourselves from the chaos around us, from the erratic policies of countries like US and leaders like Trump, and focus internally on our own growth, use our own wealth and assets to power the rise of India. So that is the argument the writer is trying to make. See, today the world is moving away from globalization. You are seeing increasing protectionist tendencies, starting right from developed nations, such as US, even European countries, etc. So, in a protectionist era, when you're seeing the rise of protectionism and inward looking economic policies by most countries, it is time for India to try and build a self reliant economy as well. I'm not saying we should cut off ourselves from the global markets and global flow of funds. That's never going to happen. But at least India can become more self sustaining by ensuring that the required funds for infrastructure development, for powering India's economic growth, comes internally from the assets that are already present with Indians. As I told you, since 2000, we have received more than $1 trillion in foreign investments into our country. But there is a very concerning development. In the financial calendar of 2024, if you take the calendar year from Jan to December 2024, the global capital flows have reduced by 11% around the world. There is a clear decline in global flow of capital, meaning foreign investments have declined because of the rising instability around the world. First, instability was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, instability was caused by the wars, the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, and now the policies of Donald Trump. So, global investment sentiment has basically gone down. Private investors are holding back. And you see a big decline happening in foreign capital flows up to 11%. International projects, which depended on global finance, this has declined by 27% in the calendar year of 2024. So, projects which were funded through international sources has gone down by 27%. That's a clear sign again of rising protectionism, of capital being locked away, and it's a sign that you can't depend on foreign flows anymore. And if you look at FPIs, foreign portfolio investments, anyways, it has always been volatile. That's why it is called as hot money or hot capital. Because depending on global developments and geopolitical shocks, FPI investments will always flee your country, especially from developing nations. So you can't rely either ways on FPI, right? You can't rely on hot capital, which can take flight any moment. For each and every crisis, FPI investments will take flight from our country. So it has always been a volatile hot capital. So it's never suitable for us to rely on it. Yes, FDI flow into India has been very crucial, but you're seeing a stagnation happening and a decline in such investments. So the signs are there for India that you can't depend on just foreign flow of funds, on foreign markets. The time has come for Bharat to unlock its own potential by relying on Bharat's own assets. And these assets are held by all of us, by you and me, by our families, by our grandmothers, locked up in almirahs, locked up in bank lockers. And that is gold. Did you know that India holds the world's largest private reserve of gold? 25,000 tons. This is the single largest private reserve of gold in the world. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the rising value of gold in the last few months. As there is greater global economics uncertainty, there is more movement of capital towards gold because gold has always been that buffer. Gold has always been a safe value, a safe asset, which can hold value despite inflation and despite economic turmoil. I'm sure you would have heard your grandparents or your parents telling you that invest in gold, that this is something which will always retain value, right? They might even discourage you from investing in stock markets, right? Maybe even in real estate, given the risk involved in it. But they'll always keep telling you, please buy gold, invest more in gold. So this is quite literally golden advice. It's not just the appreciation that gold has seen, because gold historically has been a value, a store of that asset, right? It's seen as a adequate buffer against any uncertainties that will develop. And for India, gold is not just about economic savings and investments. It's not just about the financial aspect of it. Gold has a cultural, civilizational value for India. Since ancient times, gold has been a precious metal, right? There is a lot of cultural affinity towards gold across Indian families, across religions, across societies, across regions. You find that affinity towards gold. So, this is something you can't change overnight. 25,000 tons of gold is locked up in private reserves held by Indian families. Now, how do we mobilize this for the growth of Bharat? This is Bharat's asset. Yes, it is individual wealth held by individuals and families, but there is a way to mobilize this to power national growth without compromising the assets of the individuals and the families. Now, for example, gold, which is held as private reserve in India, roughly 25,000 tons of it, it is valued at $2.5 trillion. Just imagine this. This is almost 55% of our current GDP. Almost 55% of our current GDP is the value of private gold reserves, which is held in our country. This is actually much, much higher than all the bank credit given by Indian banks. You take the cumulative loans given out by all the Indian banks, even that will not overtake the value of private gold which is held by Indian families. That is the kind of asset which is sitting in our almirahs, in bank lockers. But there is a way to mobilize this for nation building without compromising the savings of the individuals and the families. This is where gold monetization policy comes into picture. There is a way to monetize this gold, right? Because see, though India holds this massive reserve, right, in a private capacity, the problem is we have been heavily dependent on gold imports. Almost 87% of the gold that we are consuming is met through import route, which means we again have a dependency here. Most of the gold that we use, that we buy, is largely coming from outside, just like our oil. 85% of our oil requirement is met through imports. Similarly, 87% of our gold demand is met through imports. So this is never conducive. It's like a paradox. 8% of our import bill is comprised of gold imports, which is massive, which contributes to higher current account deficit for India. In fact, between 2010 and 2013, gold import alone accounted for one-third of our trade deficit. If you take the total trade deficit of India on the current account, almost 30% of the deficit was because of gold imports. So what is this paradox? We are so dependent on imports. So what do? We do have a lot of reserves in a private capacity, but we are having a lot of import dependency. So the writer offers a solution. The writer is proposing a well crafted gold monetization policy pushed by the government, the RBI, and supported by the banks. This is a route for monetizing the current gold which is already there. 25,000 tons of gold, $2.5 trillion worth of gold. Even if a tiny fraction of that is monetized, brought into the economy as a value creating asset and used to power India's growth, that would be transformative for India's economy. Now, in a gold monetization scheme, right, the government and RBI will basically back the initiative where you can deposit the gold with the central bank, the bankers. In return, there would be a certain interest that would be paid, which would become income generating for the families as well, for the individuals who are owning that gold and depositing that gold with the government and the banks. But for this scheme to work, because this has been tried many times, it's not that India has never tried gold monetization. It has been tried, it has not really worked. And whenever it has worked, it has not been a big hit. But the writer is suggesting, how can we make this better? How can we convince more Indians to bring that private gold, which is held privately, bring it out and monetize it so that the government and the banks can utilize it? This can be done by creating a trust based system. You need four basic ingredients for this. One, infrastructure. Infrastructure for what? You need infrastructure for hallmarking and purity. When it comes to gold, purity is everything. So you need to standardize and you need to have systems in place to check the purity of the gold and ensure that the hallmarking standards are maintained. So the government can set up these centers which can test the purity, which can collect the private gold based on the purity level and base it on the Bureau of Indian Standards. Because right now, most of the private gold which is held, it is unbranded. So there's no 100% guarantee that it has great purity in terms of its quality. So the government can streamline this by setting up these collection centers, hallmarking and purity centers, which will test the purity of the gold and basically brand them as 22 carat, for example. Ensure that there are collection centers, which could be your banks, which can digitize this gold. Basically, for the gold you deposit with the bank, if there are hallmarking purity centers, they can test the quality. Accordingly, the value can be determined and you deposit the gold and in return, you get interest. You earn money on it and ensure that this is digitized just like a bank account. So today you have trust in money. You trust the rupee. You trust the legal tender, right? Because it's very transparent. The money is flowing in front of your eyes, though it's all digital today. You trust the banking system to work and you have faith in the Indian currency because this whole system is built on trust. And similarly, a system can be created for gold. Just like we have a saving banks account for money, there can be an account, a digital account for gold, which you are monetizing, where you can track your gold which is deposited, where you can track the interest which is being accumulated and track the money which is flowing into you personally. So if this transparent system is created with maintaining the quality standards, with the right infrastructure, with the logistics in place, and if this is based on trust, and if it generates actual wealth for the people as well, this can be a way out for India. This monetized gold can now be used by the central bank, can be used by the government to essentially generate loans by using gold as a collateral. And the expert writer points out that such funds that you're going to raise will be available at an interest rate of just 4.5 to 6.5%, which is much lower compared to international borrowing rates. If you borrow directly from international institutions and international markets, the interest rates are much higher, almost touching 9-10%. But if we can monetize the gold which is privately held, create a solid trust based system for pushing citizens to deposit that gold, use that gold as a collateral, maybe to bring out more money or to raise fresh loans, then the interest rates for these loans would drop to just 4.5 to 6.5%. And this money which is mobilized, this capital, now can be used for infrastructure creation in the country to fund the public projects, to fund the mega projects of India, which will help India become a little more self reliant. So that is the argument the writer is making. And please take up this practice question. The time has come to unlock Bharat's own wealth to fuel Bharat's own growth. That's a statement directly taken from the article. In the light of the statement, examine how India's private gold reserves can fuel self reliant growth. So let's discuss the answer writing approach for this question. That's something we do in every session. So you can start your answer either by talking about the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, discuss why India has to become self reliant, right? Present the context, point out how India is facing these difficulties because of American policies, American tariffs, or argue about the history of India facing similar challenges, how India has come out on top by being self reliant, by having faith in its own inherent strength, by turning every crisis into an opportunity. Every time we faced an external crisis, we have turned that into an opportunity. Be it the green revolution, the LPG reforms, the IT revolution, or even the COVID pandemic. Every time when there is a crisis which is pushed on India, we have managed to turn that into an opportunity to power India's growth. So why can't we do the same again? So this can be your opening argument based on Atmanirbharata, based on the history of India, turning each crisis into an opportunity. So this is one method of introducing the answer. Or you can take a completely different route. Since the question is directly focused on private gold reserves, why don't you talk about the private gold reserves of India, the size of this asset, the value of this asset? You can mention that gold has always been a store of value, offering a hedge against crisis, against inflation, historically as well. In India, there's a lot of cultural connection with gold. It's not just an economic link that people have. Point out the private reserve, which is the single largest private reserve of gold, and bring out its value, right? $2.5 trillion. So that could be one introduction where you are pointing out India's inherent wealth, which is already there with us, which can be used to power India's growth story. So you can either introduce through the concept of Atmanirbharata or through data based on India's private gold reserves. So it's up to you. Then in the body, discuss how India can reduce dependency on foreign funds. How India can reduce dependency on foreign markets. But this should be based again on a very sound argument based on data. You have to present data here as well to point out how foreign inflows are declining, how foreign inflows are reducing because of greater uncertainty and protectionism. Point out the declining inflow of foreign capital, how international projects, finance through international capital is declining, which means you can't rely on this anymore. We need to look for other sources internally from our own wealth assets. So once you make the point, then discuss gold, which can be monetized, which can be used to raise loans at low interest rates. This can reduce our dependency on foreign debt, on foreign capital that we need to attract. This can help India become a little more self reliant. Maybe we can never cut off ourselves from the global economy. Maybe that is not possible. That's not required as well. But at least we can insulate ourselves from these global pressures which are building up. Right? So this can be your line of argument and then conclude your answer. Conclude again by talking about the importance of being self reliant. So this is a great lesson for UPSC aspirants as well. If India could turn every crisis into an opportunity, then you can do the same with your preparation. Right? I've seen many students asking, sir, I'm losing motivation, I can't study, or I'm facing this crisis in my personal life and I'm not able to study. Right? They say that parents are not supportive or they had a breakup, right? Or maybe they're getting distracted by their friends, being pressurized by their families. Now, right here is a lesson for you. Every crisis is an opportunity if you look inwards, if you look at yourself, if you look at your goals, if you look at what you want. And that is exactly what you can bring out in this answer. You can get a little philosophical, little rhetorical in this answer. Conclude by saying that it is high time that we use every crisis as an opportunity. We have done this before as well. So why can't we do it again? And gold can be a potential answer to give that financial independence for India and reduce our dependency on foreign funds and foreign markets. Right? So that's the whole point. So based on this, please practice your answer writing. Now let's move to the next article. It's a related topic again from economy related to the same thing that we are discussing. Now, previously we discussed how private gold held by Indian families can power India's growth, how it can make India self-reliant. Now, this article is focused on private capital. Why private capital should be brought into the economy more to help India during a time of crisis. So private capital here refers to Indian corporates. Don't worry, the writer is not asking for your money. The writer is pushing the Indian companies, Indian corporates, especially the conglomerates. The writer is saying the time has come for Indian companies which have benefited from India's growth story to contribute back to nation building. Because right now, our nation is definitely facing one of its most difficult moments. The 50% American tariffs on India indeed will have a devastating impact, right? Especially in the coming months. By 2026, you will realize the actual downstream impact of these tariffs. A lot of people are going to lose jobs probably, especially in export oriented industries like textiles, pharma, and leather and furniture industries, etc. Lakhs of jobs are at stake. If these export oriented factories and companies shut down, obviously they're going to lay off those employees. This will create a chain reaction, which could affect overall domestic demand and lead to a cascading effect on the Indian economy. So, one way for India to overcome this challenge is to ensure that our corporates, the Indian conglomerates, which have until now benefited from India's growth, they have to contribute back to our economy. That is the whole argument of this article. See, before 1990s, when India was still under the socialist era, still following a protectionist, inward looking socialist economic model, when you had the license Raj, Inspector Raj era, a few Indian capitalists, they benefited from these policies. Though such socialist policies are looked down upon today, there was a period from 1950s to 1990s where few companies, few families, family run businesses, they actually benefited from these policies and they made enormous wealth because the market was closed for competition. How do you think conglomerates like Reliance, Tatas, Godrej, Birlas, how are they created? They managed to accumulate wealth, massive amounts of wealth and resources, thanks to the policies of the government prior to 1990s. And post 1990s, after the reforms era, after LPG reforms, the very same Indian corporate entities benefited enormously because they had the expertise, the wealth, and resources with them, which they could now employ in the market. The rise of conglomerates like Adani's, Reliance, and others is fueled by India's reforms. The government came out with favorable policies, giving tax breaks and tax holidays and tax rebates. Today, you have PLI scheme, production linked incentive scheme. Lot of tax breaks have been given to the corporates because this would incentivize the corporates to invest, create jobs, which in turn will have a cyclical effect. Just through our domestic market, these conglomerates have created profits for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with it. Obviously, capitalist business is based on the profit motive. But now, the time has come for these conglomerates to contribute to nation building, to align their investment policies with the national goals, with national interests of India. Today, these conglomerates, they have the confidence and the money to invest abroad because their growth was powered by Indian government, by the Indian people, by the Indian economy. Do you think without that, a conglomerate like Adani, Reliance, or Godrej or Tata's, do you really think they could have gone and acquired foreign companies? Do you really think they could have operated in foreign markets? Today, they are in that position because they benefited from the policies of the government. They benefited from the Indian economy, the rise of the Indian economy, and the hard work of the Indian people. So today, it's their turn to contribute back and focus inward and channel their investments towards India because the nation demands that right now. When the country is facing this crisis, you are facing an outright assault by a hostile government. So the time has come for these companies to contribute back. Because if you look at data again, in the last few years, Indian companies are investing more abroad than investing here in India. If you look at the rate at which investments are growing up, Indian companies are investing at a faster rate abroad in foreign markets, focused on their subsidiaries and other investments and acquisitions, than compared to what they are investing in the Indian market. So the rate of investment, the rate at which investments are rising compared to the investment they are making domestically and the investments they are making abroad, there is a big mismatch which is coming up. So now the time has come to reverse this trend. They have to align with the government policies, with our national interests. And instead of focusing on foreign investments, these Indian companies, which have until now benefited from Indian economy and government policies, they have to invest back in India. So this is the whole argument of this article. Now, for example, if you look at private capital expenditure, private capex has largely remained stagnant for the last 10, 15 years. The private industries of India are not really investing as much. Compared to that, the government has really scaled up its investments. Look at the public capex, the public capital expenditure. It was hardly 3 lakh crores before COVID 19. Post pandemic, the government has increased its investments significantly in capital expenditure. Today, it is touching almost 10 lakh crore rupees. So government has been the biggest spender always, especially during times of crisis. In the previous article, I told you about the 2008 recession. Even then, it was the government, the RBI, which made the investments and ensured the capital flow and liquidity flows. It was not the private industry. We saw this again during pandemic and post pandemic. It was the government which pushed the investments first. Then the private capital came in. That too, it was not up to the expected mark. If you look at the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate of government public expenditure, it has grown at 25% year on year. Whereas foreign investment of our companies is growing at a CAGR of 12.6%. Indian companies are investing more abroad. They're investing in US, they're investing in UK, they're investing heavily in Africa, in other countries. So this investment outflow has gone up. The rate increase is higher. So it's time to reverse the trend and bring that investment back into our country, focusing on domestic economy. Is that clear? So that's the point the writer is trying to make. Then it's not just about bringing the investments back of Indian companies. It's also about ensuring that Indian workers, the average Indian middle class, will benefit from private capital. See, these conglomerates have made huge profits year on year. But if you look at real wage growth of an average Indian, the wage growth has actually declined over the years. This anomaly has to be fixed. Private profits have gone up for the conglomerates and the large industries, but the wage growth, the real wage growth for Indian workers has been declining. And in recent years, it's not even compensating for the inflation. If you compare with inflation, right, basically the wage growth you're experiencing is negative. You're losing money year on year, earning less. Your purchasing power is going down, whereas the Indian corporates are making more profits year on year. The time has come to fix this anomaly as well. If Indian economy has to become more self-reliant, private capital has to lead to increase in wages for Indian workers, meaning they have to pay more salaries, as simple as that. Then third, very important, private capital should focus on R&D and innovation. There is no excuse for this. When it comes to R&D and innovation, you know who's the biggest investor in India? It's again the government, not our private industries. Now, this is not the case in any developed country. You look at United States, look at The fast emerging nations like China, look at industrialized markets like South Korea, Japan, Europe. In all these countries, most of the investment in R&D and innovation comes from private industries. It's more than 70%. In US, China, Japan, South Korea, etc., if you take the total investment in R&D from both private and public sector, more than 70% investment is coming from private sector. You know what's the number in India? In India, it's hardly 36, 37%. Indian private investments in R&D is hardly 36, 37%. So who's funding the gap? The gap is being funded by the government. The government is spending almost 70% or 65% around that. Whereas private sector investments in R&D innovation is very, very less. Our cumulative investment in R&D is hardly 0.64% of our GDP. If you compare this with countries like China, Japan, US, they are spending almost 2% of their GDP, even higher than that. 2 to 3% of their GDP on R&D and innovation. Now, this is what creates value in your economy. This leads to value addition. This is what contributes to the accumulation of intellectual property, which in turn brings wealth for developed industrialized countries. So if this has to happen in India, it's time for the Indian conglomerates and the private capitalists to step up their investments, not just in the Indian market, but channel those investments towards R&D and innovation. Understood? So that is the point the writer is making. So the writer is calling upon private capital in India to align with national interests and to support the Indian economy during a difficult time. So based on this, take up this practice question and please try to write an answer for this question. Now moving on to the next article, it's related to Naxalism, the Maoist movement in India. The writer is calling upon the Maoists to surrender, to end their almost 7 decades of insurgency, 6 to 7 decades of insurgency, and to bring the Naxal conflict to an end. The writer is pointing out that Naxalism is on the brink of collapse. So it's time for them to lay down their arms, surrender, and come into the mainstream and bring normalcy back to the Naxal corridor, the Naxal affected regions of India. See, in 1967, this radical left-wing extremist ideology took root at Naxalbari, a village in West Bengal, which was affected by the feudal nature of its society. So land-related issues and factors in West Bengal, which were controlled by the landlords, the zamindars, their exploitation of the landless, the peasants, and the farmers and workers, led to the first uprising, the Naxal uprising, inspired by the ideology of Maoism, a left-wing extremist communist ideology from China. This began the insurgent war against the Indian state. The Naxals managed to quickly spread their presence. They got a lot of support from the rural agrarian belt, where farmers were having resentment against the state. Right? They felt that the state had abandoned them. They felt their land was being taken away for large public projects and they were not being compensated. They were not being rehabilitated. The lack of good governance was affecting the tribal population. It was affecting the peasants. It was affecting workers in factories and industries. The failure of governance, in a way, directly contributed to the growing support base for the Naxals. So, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we saw the emergence of multiple Naxal outfits. For example, we had the MCCI, the Maoist Communist Center of India, primarily centered around the West Bengal Bihar belt, where land-related issues and factors were the primary reason that contributed to the rise of Maoism. Then we had the PWG, the People's War Group, centered primarily on tribal issues and forest-related issues in the Chhattisgarh, Odisha belt and Telangana belt. Like this, there were different factions of Naxalism. We also had the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, a radical faction operating in different pockets of the country. But India managed to weaken these groups through security operations. In the 1980s and 1990s, India weakened these outfits through targeted security operations, but we never addressed the root causes. Some of the genuine root causes of our farmers, The tribal community, the forest dwelling tribes, peasants, and workers were not addressed. Now, without addressing the root cause, you can never win an ideological war. You can try to crush the movement with force through your security operations, but that alone will not ensure victory. You can't eradicate such a strong ideological movement without addressing the genuine root causes. So, though they were weakened by 1990s and early 2000, we did not see the death of Naxalism. We didn't see the end of Naxalism. Rather, we saw a major revival of Naxalism in 2004. All these weakened Naxal outfits, they came together to form a strategic alliance as advocated by Mao Zedong himself. The proponent of this extremist ideology always advocated the followers of Maoism to be ready for a strategic partnership, a strategic alliance when the time arises. Mao Zedong has advocated a protracted people's war, an armed rebellion against the state to overthrow the state. So it's an inherently violent ideology which can survive, which can basically persevere over decades, regroup if required, and it can always carry out a resurgence when necessary. Though the movement was weakening by early 2000, they managed to form a strategic alliance. These three groups came together to establish the CPI Maoist. This is how the current Naxal outfit was born. In 2004, the MCCI, PWG, and CPI Marxist-Leninist, these three Naxal factions, they merged to establish the CPI Maoist. According to the Intelligence Bureau, this was the most dangerous internal security development of that era, of that decade. This is what led then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to label Naxalism, left wing extremism, as our biggest security challenge, because this was an internal threat coming from within. So, since then, India has stepped up its fight against Naxalism, and we are not just focused on better security operations, but we are focused on addressing some of the root causes. So there is a two-pronged approach, a two-pillar approach that the government of India has been following at least since 2007, 2008. The then Manmohan Singh government and the current Modi government in particular, both have contributed enormously to tackle Naxalism from the grassroots. On the security side, police forces have been modernized, better training, better weapons have been provided. The center has been reimbursing the cost of modernization through special schemes of the Home Ministry. The Home Ministry runs a special scheme called SRE, Security Related Expenditure Scheme. Through this, the Home Ministry has been reimbursing the state governments for modernization of their police force. The state police have set up their own special force units for anti-Naxal operations. They drew inspiration from the Greyhounds of Andhra Pradesh, the erstwhile United State of Andhra Pradesh. In 1980s, the Greyhounds, a special force of Andhra Police, they registered tremendous success against Naxals. It was because of the Greyhounds that the PWG was decimated in the Andhra Telangana belt. These were highly trained, highly motivated commandos, well trained, well equipped, and it mainly consisted of local recruits. That's where the Andhra Pradesh police made a difference. They recruited local youth who were affected by Naxalism, who had a personal motive to fight this war. They were given superior training, better reimbursement, and better weapons, and they could build a stronger intelligence network on the ground. The Greyhounds registered a tremendous success against PWG in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana of that period. This became an inspiration for other states. States like Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Maharashtra, they've all created similar special forces, which has played a very big role in weakening Naxalism over the years. The MHA deployed CRPF as the primary anti-Naxal force to supplement the state police forces. Because see, fighting Naxalism is essentially a responsibility of the state governments. Policing, law and order, public order, these are state subjects. But internal security is responsibility of both state and center. So Home Ministry can supplement the efforts of the state. So apart from helping in modernization of state police forces and providing better intelligence, the center deployed a dedicated anti-Naxal force, the CRPF, and it raised a special force unit called Cobra. Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. It's a special force unit like the Greyhounds and other state level special forces, which is trained in jungle warfare, which has better equipment, better training. So these intelligence based, intelligence driven operations have yielded better results in recent years. Since Operation Green Hunt of 2009 to 2011 to the latest Operation Black Forest in 2025, we have seen a transformation of the security based operations, the intelligence driven operations. The Intelligence Bureau, then NTRO, National Technical Research Organization, they have played a key role in generating actionable intelligence for these special forces on the ground. And the government has now mainly targeted the leadership of the Naxals. See, last year, Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah, they declared Naxal Mukt Bharat as a goal by March 2026. There was a renewed effort to defeat Naxalism through security operations, which was to target the leadership, target the central committee members, the Politburo members, which are the leadership bodies of the CPI Maoist. Now, at one point, when Naxalism was at its peak, in the central committee, there were 42 members. If you look at the CPI Maoist and its predecessor organizations, during the peak of Naxal activity, there were 42 members in the central committee. There were nearly 25 members in the Politburo Standing Committee. They had a cadre strength of easily 10,000 fighters. This was the rough estimate of their strength. Rough force of 10,000 cadres across the country in the Naxal hotspots, and close to 42 members in Central Committee forming the mid leadership, 25 members in the Politburo headed by the General Secretary forming the top tier of the leadership. Today, the numbers have been decimated by our security forces. The General Secretary himself, Basavaraju, was killed a few months ago, delivering the biggest blow to Naxalism. The Politburo members are down to 7 or 8 in single digits. Most of them either have passed away, they are suffering from ill health, they are old, and many of them have been killed by security forces as well. In the Central Committee, the members are down by a very, very big number into again single digits. The cadre strength is down to hardly 2,000, and they have lost their stronghold. Currently, the Naxal stronghold was Chhattisgarh. The forested belt in Dandakaranya region was the last remaining stronghold, which they were calling it as a so-called liberated zone. But security forces have decimated this liberated zone around Bastar, Sukma, Dantewad, and Bijapur. And in most areas, the government is now taking back control. Their cadre strength is down. The leadership is almost wiped out. For 2 consecutive years, close to 500 Naxals have been killed. 1,000 plus have surrendered. And the government still has a lucrative surrender and rehabilitation policy for them. Parallelly, we have been able to provide better governance. We have addressed the deficit in governance. Better welfare programs for farmers, for tribal community, for Naxal hit areas. Better infrastructure has been provided, right? Compensation has been provided. And there is greater representation for the people of this region as well, for the entire Naxal corridor, which has been affected. So the overall improvement in development, the step up in security operations based on intelligence, the wipeout of the leadership, the reduction in the cadre strength, and the recent killings, the recent surrenders, it has basically rung the death knell for Naxals in the country. So the writer is saying there's no point for Naxals in continuing this war anymore. They are at their weakest as of now, and the time has come for the government as well to step up, to open up a channel so that Naxals can lay down their arms and surrender. Understood? Because we should not allow them to revive and regroup as it happened in 2004. Don't forget, Maoism is based on a protracted ideology, an ideology which can persevere, which can wait for its time to remain dormant and come back and revive. So the government should utilize this opportunity to talk to the Naxals maybe, or give them a clear chance to surrender. The government does have a surrender policy, but ensure that a pathway is created for the Naxals to lay down their arms. And this decision, of course, has to come from the remaining leadership of the Central Committee and the Politburo. So this very well might help achieve the Naxal Mukt target that the government of India under Prime Minister Modi has laid down. And that would be one of the biggest success for India, ending a 70-year-old insurgency, right? Nearly 60, 70-year-old insurgency would be one of the biggest victories as far as India's internal security is concerned. Then coming to a recent development, the Nobel Prize for Physics. Yesterday we spoke about the Nobel for Medicine, right? Today we'll briefly discuss the Nobel Prize for Physics. So please note down those who have won this award. The facts may be relevant for prelims. Three researchers from United States, John Clark, Michael Devoret, John Martinez. They have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their groundbreaking experiments carried out in 1980s at the University of California. The research goes back to 1980s. And what was the pioneering work they carried out? It was in the quantum domain, in the field of quantum mechanics. They established and proved the concept of quantum tunneling in the real world. Now, if you understand the basics of quantum mechanics, you would know that the quantum world is something that we can't experience, we can't realize or imagine as easily. Right? It happens at the particle level, at the subatomic level. Let's say a movie like Ant-Man has done a fine job of depicting the science behind quantum mechanics. Though the whole story is fictional, at least the whole concept is very well depicted. There are many other shows, documentaries, which do a fine job of helping us at least grasp what is the quantum world and quantum mechanics. But this is a transformative domain which has been contributing to the field of science, physics from the last 60, 70 years. There has been some groundbreaking work in the field of quantum dynamics. And these researchers pioneered something known as an experiment that proved the existence of quantum tunneling, which changed the understanding of our world. Because at the quantum level, the classical physics will not function anymore. I mean, the basic understanding that we humans have of our surrounding, of our physical environment, those basic physics laws, they don't apply in the quantum world. So in quantum tunneling, what if I told you that particles, quantum level particles, subatomic particles, they can actually pass through physical barriers? That is the quantum tunneling effect. Now, let's take some example. Let's say you take a cricket ball, right, and you throw it at a wall. In our physical macroscopic world, right, the macroscopic world that we live in, you expect the ball to hit the wall and bounce back, and that's what happens. But at the quantum level, at the subatomic level, the same particles of that ball, some of them would have managed to pass through that barrier, pass through the wall and emerge on the other side. Now, this can never happen in our macroscopic world. Let's say you run into a wall, you'll crash, you'll fall, you'll take that blow. But at the quantum level, some of the subatomic particles will manage to breach that barrier, cross that physical barrier to the other side. Now, in classical physics, this is not possible, but at the quantum level, this exists. So, though it was theorized, it was these three researchers who established this practically through an experiment, which could be envisioned by humans in our macroscopic world. They created an electric circuit. They created an electric circuit using two superconductors, which were cryo frozen to absolute zero temperature, and they passed a current. And this current passed without any loss because they introduced a ultra thin material, very, very fine material called the Josephson junction. UPSC might ask you in prelims about the Josephson junction. It was one of the breaking innovations of our times. I'll tell you the application part of it. I'll tell you where you can see the implementation of Josephson junction. But first, understand that Josephson junction, developed by these researchers in this electric circuit, allowed the current to pass through without any loss, without zero loss, which is not possible in our physical world. In the regular macroscopic world, it doesn't happen. There's always some loss that occurs. But because of the way they set up the experiment, right? The way they employed quantum dynamics, it allowed for quantum tunneling where the current was passing through the barrier without suffering any loss at the Josephson junction, thus allowing humans to experience the quantum tunneling effect at the macroscopic level itself. Now, this technology, this innovation finds application in quantum computing. It finds application in the development of superconductors, which is at the cutting edge of scientific research today, right? Quantum computers which are being developed, the quantum chips which are being created using the qubits, they're all based on this principle. And they all employ the Josephson junction that was developed by these three researchers who have been awarded with the Nobel Prize for Physics. Is that clear? Now, there's one important takeaway from this. This tells you that in the field of science, inquiry is what is important. The spirit of inquiry, the spirit of scientific temper is what is important. Because these researchers did not care about the application, they did not care about the money, the profits that could be made. Even the University of California deserves all the praise. They funded such a leading research without understanding what could be the future application or the future profits that could be made out of it. And the editorial says that this is what true research should be about. True research should be about inquiry, understanding our world, and focusing on these basic scientific questions. Whether or not it will reap profits shouldn't matter. Maybe someday it will lead to an application. Now, who would have thought of quantum computers? Who would have thought superconducting material is a possibility? Right? The researchers themselves would not have fantasized such a future. But still, they raised the right questions. They went in deep into the field. They had the right backing at the university level, at the level of the government as well. So that, I think, is the takeaway from this article. The editorial says the physics Nobel this time, it basically points out that promoting such fundamental research and sponsoring such basic research in science is essential because this promotes the spirit of inquiry, which is what drives human ingenuity without bothering much about what could be the future applications, what could be the profits that could be made. Next, a big development in international relations. India is all set to transform its ties with Afghanistan. We are all set to witness something that was unthinkable a few years ago. India engaging with Taliban. Even Taliban was in power in 1996. India had cut off all ties with the Taliban regime. Until 2021, we considered Taliban as a terrorist organization because Taliban was a puppet of Pakistan, of the Pakistani deep state, the army and the ISI. Taliban was cultivating anti-India terror groups at the behest of Pakistan. The Taliban back then had been working with terror groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, enabling their terror activities against India. But today things have turned around. India has opened up to the Taliban since it came back to power in 2021. India has slowly built contacts. We reopened our embassy in Kabul. We maintained a diplomatic channel with the Taliban. Recently, India has started high-level interaction with the foreign minister, Amir Khan Mutaqi. A few months ago, India's foreign secretary, Vikram Misri, met with the interim Taliban regime's foreign minister, Amir Khan Mutaqi, in Dubai. Then, right during Operation Sindhu, right after that, India's foreign minister, S. Jaishankar, held a telephonic conversation with Amir Khan Mutaqi. And now he has been invited to India as an official delegate, as the official representative of the Afghan state. So, meaning India is slowly inching towards a de facto recognition for the Taliban regime. So, tomorrow, Amir Khan Mutaqi is going to land in India. Now, why is this important? Amir Khan Mutaqi is a globally designated terrorist. He is under global sanctions. Please make a note. He is sanctioned by the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the UN Security Council. So these globally designated terrorists by the UNSC, they are under sanctions. Any country should help the UN to impose financial sanctions on them, to freeze their assets and accounts. They should place travel restrictions on them, preventing them from traveling. And if they enter the country, they're bound to arrest them and prevent them from accessing arms and weapons. These sanctions will apply on these globally designated terrorists, and every UN member has an obligation to abide by them. But now India has got a special exemption. We approached the United Nations asking for an exemption for Amir Khan Mutaqi to visit India. The UN accepted India's request, and following this UN approval, a globally designated terrorist who is currently the foreign minister of Afghanistan is visiting India in an official capacity, and he will get the complete state welcome. All the protocols of MEA will be in place, right? He will be received by India's officials and leadership. He would meet definitely with India's foreign minister, India's national security advisor, and maybe he would have a meeting with India's prime minister as well. Maybe. And what is even more interesting is that today, UK's prime minister also is in India. Keir Starmer is on a very important visit focused on economic ties. And at the same time, the Taliban minister is also landing in the country. Now, what is important here is that just few days ago, Russia was hosting the Moscow format of talks. Under the Moscow format, Russia has been engaging with Taliban and bringing the regional players together. In this Moscow format, Pakistan was invited, China is invited, Iran, Central Asian countries, and India. These are the participants in the Moscow format of talks, which is focused on stabilizing Afghanistan, stabilizing the Taliban ruled regime in Afghanistan. So at the Moscow format, until now, Taliban was just an observer. It didn't have official membership. But at the recent Moscow format, where India was also present, Taliban has been given official recognition. India has supported this. So experts are pointing out maybe we are moving towards giving de facto recognition. Right now, Russia is the only country which has formally, officially recognized the Taliban regime. Pakistan and China have de facto recognized Taliban. China also has received Taliban officials. Now, India is also joining the ranks. At the Moscow format, a statement was issued criticizing the US and the demand of Trump to return the Bagram Air Base. You might be aware, US is seeking to take control of Bagram Air Base, which was an American military base previously. Taliban has rejected this. And at the Moscow format, all the countries passed a statement supporting Taliban, supporting Afghanistan. India is a signatory to this, meaning we have taken a stand against the United States, rejected the American demand to gain military control over Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. At the Moscow consultation, which took place, even the flag that was used officially was that of the Taliban, not the previous flag of Afghanistan. If you have seen the Afghan cricket team, you might remember the flag, the tricolor, which has the red, black, and green combination. So this was the official flag of Afghanistan recognized by the UN. Even now, this is the UN recognized flag of the previous government. But Taliban's flag is not recognized. But at the Moscow format, when it was admitted as a member, the Taliban flag in white and black was displayed. And India was also part of it, meaning India has agreed to giving that recognition to Taliban. So these are very big changes that are happening in our foreign policy, very interesting times. So let's see whether India will go ahead and give official recognition. According to me, official recognition is unlikely. It's not going to happen. India would never take such a risk because then you will be going against the UN itself, right? It will create complexities for us in our fight against terrorism. In our counter-terrorism efforts aimed at Pakistan, this will create a lot of roadblocks for us at the UN. We will face a lot of criticism from Western countries. So India might continue this de facto approach, meaning for every practical matter, we are dealing with Afghanistan and Taliban, engaging with them, giving them official engagement. But in return, I mean, we will secure our interests, our strategic and economic interests and counterterrorism interests. But India will not officially give that recognition and establish ties with Taliban. Maybe we'll maintain that distance. Without officially setting up the ties, we will maintain de facto relations, give that de facto recognition. So this would change our approach entirely. So let's wait and watch. Next, on page 12, there's another important article. Yesterday, we spoke about drug safety, drug control standards in our country, correct? So today, there is an article that gives you more insight and details about drug control standards in the country. We have two types of important regulations in place. One is ONDLS, the Online National Drugs Licensing System. So this is a single window portal. It's an online portal where drug companies and drug manufacturers will apply for their licensing. And this entire process has been streamlined. This portal itself has been set up by the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, CDAC, in collaboration with the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, which is the drug regulator in the country. Under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, the CDSCO and the Drug Controller General of India, they are the nodal authorities to regulate drugs and ensure the safety and quality of drugs. So CDSCO has collaborated with CDAC to develop this online portal, the Online National Drug Licensing System, which is a single window system for all the drug manufacturers to register themselves, to obtain the license and ensure that the basic regulations are followed. According to the government, according to the health ministry, around 18 states and their drug control departments, they have already implemented this online licensing system. They're part of ONDLS. But however, when it comes to safety standards and taking action against spurious drugs, there is a guideline called CAPA guideline, Corrective and Preventive Action Guidelines. These guidelines basically try to ensure the safety of drugs, and if there are any violations in the quality and in the manufacturing and in the safety standards, then corrective action can be taken through investigations where those companies can be penalized and their licenses can be revoked. But the problem here is not even one state has adopted the CAPA guidelines. At the state level, not even a single state government has adopted the corrective and preventive action guidelines. Now, this is very critical. It's a critical reform that the government of India had introduced under Schedule M to regulate Indian pharma industry. The government of India recently brought these changes, introduced two reforms. One was the online portal, the National Drug Licensing System. The other was the CAPA guideline, the Corrective Preventive Action Guideline. States have only implemented the online licensing system, but they have not implemented the CAPA guidelines, which is important for maintaining the safety of our drugs and ensure that corrective action is taken when there is a failure of the safety norms. Now, finally, we come to the prelim section, one last article for today, and let's end the discussion after that. So on the supplement page where we have science and tech articles, there is the small articles on the supermoon phenomena. So what's a supermoon? There might be a possible question on this. The supermoon is more of an optical illusion that occurs when there is a full moon or a new moon at a time when the moon is at its closest to the earth, which we call as the perigee moment. Because of moon's orbit, right? It's not a perfect circle. It has a elliptical orbit around the earth. So there is a closest point and the farthest point. Closest point to the earth is your perigee. The farthest point would be the apogee. So when the moon is at the perigee point, at the closest approach point towards the earth, and at the same time a full moon, a new moon occurs, this moon will appear much brighter, much larger in size, almost 14% larger, 30% brighter. And it even appears as a bright red color sometimes, right? Depending on the atmospheric composition and the dispersion of the solar radiation. So this phenomena, which is more of optical illusion, is what we call as a supermoon. It does have some real world impact. It can have an impact on tidal activity, right? The lunar gravitational pull combined with the solar gravitation pull can cause changes in tidal activity, and it can especially increase coastal flooding if a storm or a cyclone occurs at the same time. So there is a real world impact as well, and there's a lot of cultural significance attached to it, a lot of spiritual significance, and even superstition attached with the supermoon phenomena. So just make a note of this, and with this we bring our discussion to an end. So I hope you guys have liked the session, understood all the topics, and if you benefited, do press the like button, share more and more comments so that the video can reach a bigger audience and can help genuine aspirants. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching.